I am coming to you on the day before the first day of school, and I wanted to make this video to really just get in the habit of making videos from my classroom, mostly because I feel like I have quite a bit of time in the mornings, and I don't always use it in the most constructive way. I'm actually very terrible at first days when it comes to school. I think back to when I was in college. And while I was in college, the first day, the first week of school, I was typically like exploring the campus, going to, the record store, which was in a couple towns over. I do remember on my orientation, I went to the casino. So to me, I always get a little bit of anxiety and I deal with it in maybe ways that are not like the best, but I always kind of pick it up, somewhere in the middle of the year. And, I actually do enjoy being in my classroom now. I'm a little under decorated right now. I have a lot of things I want to put up, but I do enjoy being in my classroom now because I think even though I've been teaching for 10 years, I've started to make it a little part of myself. And one of the things that has helped me, make it a bit more like myself is actually getting a 3D printer for my classroom, which let me bring this over. And, oops. And, in my classroom, I decided I wanted to put a 3D printer in. I have a couple name tags being printed out right now. You can see in my first line, did it actually come out too well? Let's see. So I have a couple name tags. I don't want to show you the kid's name, but I have a couple name tags that I'm printing out for the kids to paint on our first Fun Friday of the week. This is a Bambu Labs P1S, and it's a great printer. I've actually had it since May, and I printed out a little whistle here for myself. But yeah, I got all my filament here, and I think it's actually pretty important to have a 3D printer in the classroom, especially if you're technologically savvy, because it does allow you to print a lot of decorations and just a lot of items you may need throughout the school year. Is it 100% necessary? Is everybody going to find some use out of it? Like, maybe not. But at least for me, let me fix this here. At least for me, it's allowed me to show my personality a little bit more in my classroom, which I really struggled with when I first started teaching. And when I first started teaching, I was under the impression that, I had to go and buy just a handful of decorations for my classroom. And then you go to Dollar Tree, or at that time, the 99-cent store, and you don't find anything, right? You end up spending like $100 on stuff that you don't even really like, stuff that's really fragile, that's going to eventually rip, and just stuff that doesn't really speak to you. And I'm getting to the habit of like getting more things for my class that actually like speak for like who I am, right? So actually right here in this box, I wanted to unbox this here. This just came in from eBay. And I have a bit of a story for it, which is very bizarre. But this is a Scooby-Doo maquette. I think that's how you pronounce it. And I am like 95% sure that this maquette was mine when I was like 10 years old. And the reason I think that, let's let the bell go. And the reason I think that is because when I was 10, my maquette fell off of my shelf and the foot broke off. Now, I wasn't looking for this. This was something that my parents had gotten me when I was a kid, and I've always loved Scooby-Doo. But, you can see right here the glue marks. I wasn't actually looking for this. So what happened was I was on eBay, and every now and then I go on eBay, and I'm like, what happened to that, right? I remember I had this as a kid. Let me go look for that. I remember I had this. Maybe this is worth a lot of money now. And I just kind of typed this in because I vaguely remembered it. And I started seeing, I'm like, hey, you know what? I did have a Scooby-Doo statue just like this. I started looking around maybe for a couple weeks. I don't know. I was kind of interested in one because I found one for a really good price. I didn't end up winning the auction. But, I got it into my head that I really wanted one. This one popped up in my search results, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, something about this. I remember, yeah, the foot broke off, and my mom or dad glued it. Is this mine from when I was a kid? There's no like there's nothing in my there's I'm like 95% sure that this is mine. And I'm looking at it more and I'm like, some of the marks kind of look familiar. I mean, yeah, some of the edges could have been brushed, bumped or scuffed over time. But I don't know, just something about it. And then I'm looking at this, and I always remember he had a scuff on his cheek. And in my head, when I was a kid, I remember thinking, it kind of looks like Scooby Doo has toothpaste on his mouth. And, it kind of used to bother me when I was a kid. And I'm like, is this mine? It has a broken foot, the scuff on the cheek that looks like toothpaste. I think this is the one I had as a kid. And I'm like 95% sure, right? There's nothing that can prove this is mine. It's just more of a feeling. So I add it to my watch list, which I often do with things that I want, because I know somebody's going to give me a deal on it. And sure enough, this guy marked down $20 from it. I offered, I lowballed. I'm like, okay, let's shoot my shot here. I lowballed him for another $10 off of it, and they accepted it. So this came in over the weekend, and I'm like excited to have it. The coloring looks the same from what I remember it, because it was like sitting in the windowsill, and it was starting to fade, right? It wasn't like absolutely brown. It's actually kind of like a greenish brown, not green, but like a weird brown hue now. And yeah, so I don't know. I think this might be mine, and I don't know. I wanted to add this to my classroom because, again, it just kind of reminds me of like who I am, right? And what I used to really enjoy as a kid. And my classroom is not like full of these like random assortment of things, though I really would like to have that. I actually have a few things back here too. I got a Yoshi and this Venom that I 3D printed, but just adding that to the classroom and like letting the kids and the students see like who I am is it's big for me, because I'm not the best at like speaking out for myself in that way, right? I guess I kind of have trouble telling kids what I'm interested in. And I think it kind of helps too, because you can't like make the whole classroom about that. And the thing with kids, especially because I do teach 8-year-olds, they'll make that the whole day, right? They'll ask you 1,000 questions. They find out what you're interested in. They're going to just ask you about it, and from day one to the end of the year. And I kind of like these little markers, and I like these little reminders of what I'm interested in, because they do make for good conversation, and the kids can look at it and be interested in that way. So like, now that I've been teaching for 10 years, I feel more comfortable in a good way. I don't feel like, okay, I can really relax now in a way that's like, okay, I don't really have to think much about it. I still do. I still think often about what I have to do in the classroom, how I'm going to change things. But, I am comfortable like showing my interests in that way now. And I realized that last year. I realized that last year with a class that I looped with from 3rd to 4th grade, because I had a really great class. And of course, every class has its kids that are a little bit more troublesome and a little bit harder to, get to do their work or whatever it is. But, a big percentage of that class they were really awesome kids. And even the kids that had a harder time ended up being really great kids in the end. They felt more comfortable with me, and we were able to, get a lot done as far as like getting them caught up on certain math facts, or getting them caught up on reading. So having that group of kids like really let me know that I could be a little bit more comfortable with myself. I can, don't have to be so boxed up. I think that when I came into teaching, um, when I came into teaching, I really felt like I had to be a version of myself that didn't exist. And I came from a job. I used to work at a supermarket, and I've explained this to some of my co-teachers. I came from a job that was very restrictive. Working at a supermarket, you would think, okay, like there's a lot of opportunity to kind of like not so much relax, but like be more yourself because it is just an hourly job. And it was like the complete opposite of that. I remember management just being absolutely like stiff and being absolutely like really strict about the way a store was run. The dress code was really restrictive, especially when you're working with water in the back, which I did produce at a supermarket. When you're working with water in the back of the store, and the water's going through your dress shoes that they want you to wear. You're getting in trouble because your pants aren't the right tone of brown. You didn't shave, and me coming from that job to teaching, you would think it would be that transition all over again. I had a lot of anxiety coming from that previous job because I had worked at that supermarket for 11 years, and I think because of that, there was that essence of you can get in trouble at any time, which, of course, like any career or any job, there is the opportunity for you to get, reprimanded or critiqued on what you're doing. And I definitely had a lot of that in teaching, but I think I really struggled with the openness of being like who you are. And it took me a few years. I really didn't become comfortable with it, like I said, until like last year. Um, and I think back to the hardest parts about teaching, and I think back to like working at that supermarket, and I would choose teaching every day, every day, even the hardest days. I've had some really tough days. The hardest days, I would choose teaching. I really would, because of things like allowing myself to be myself, and getting to know the kids and enjoying seeing kids grow in that way is really rewarding in that essence. But when I see people stepping down from teaching, and I'll admit, I think that well, let me finish this thought first. When I see people stepping down from teaching to go work retail, it's really hard for me to fathom, because I came from retail, and it's not fun. It is not fun in the least. I would not go back. I've had dreams that give me anxiety that I'm back in retail, and it sucks. And I've had some anxious dreams about teaching. I absolutely have, especially in my first years, like trying to get my credential, but nowhere near like the what I think is likely trauma from that other job. But you know, one of the things I'm kind of excited about in terms of like having kids again in the classroom is having that 3D printer and like seeing them like watch and like take part in watching the classroom take shape. I'm not good at like first days, like in terms of like, hey, my classroom is like absolutely ready. There were things I was putting in my classroom with my last class all the way up until like the last week of May, because I was just like, I get these creative ideas. I'm like, hey, that would be really cool, or this would be really cool. So me like having my classroom, like, hey, my classroom is decorated, and seeing like teachers on TikTok and seeing teachers on YouTube, like putting together like every minute detail of the classroom is like not me. I can have it clean, I can have it prepared for the kids to get here, but as far as like what I want to put in, it's very much of a flow state. Um, and so it always looks a little underdone on back to school night, which is tonight. But it's always ready, right? The kids are always ready to learn. And I do think that having the kids like see it take shape is going to be really cool. I've purchased a few basketballs for my classroom, which, let's take a look at these. One of the reasons I wanted to have different basketballs for my class is because the school actually provides a lot of PE and recess equipment to the kids, but you get a really good ball from, the storage room, and within weeks it's gone. So at least I can know, like, if my class is doing PE by ourselves, um, this is ours, and I'm going to write my name on it, and Ramos, whatever. But at least we know this is ours. So I got these and one balls. These are pretty cool. Got another one right here. So this one right here. Matter of fact, let's pump one of these up. All right, good. That only took a minute. It wasn't too bad. Yeah, these are like cool balls, admittedly too, when I came into teaching, I didn't have kids of my own. I was just out of college. When I started teaching, I got married to my wife a few months later. So it took us a while to like finally have kids. We were both in school. I was getting my credential. My wife was getting her bachelor's degree. And it was hard for me to look at the classroom from like a kid's perspective. That's changed, obviously. I've had 2 kids of my own in the last couple years. And now I can definitely like see like what would my kid want their teacher to be like. Because you don't have those thoughts like initially. Again, if you don't have kids, you don't have those thoughts right away. You just think, I just have to go in there and teach. And it's like, absolutely. Like, yeah, that's 99% of the job. But like knowing like what your kid like wants to see from their teacher, or like the comfort level that your kid wants to have with the teacher, or like just the respect and acknowledgement of like seeing them for who they are and seeing them in your classroom and like appreciating that has definitely changed. I've definitely become a lot more like I guess softer in that sense. Like I have a softer heart for it, and emotional. I think of my previous students, and again, they were awesome kids, and I think of my previous students like, man, like I'm gonna miss them, absolutely. And it's hard for me to like fathom establishing those relationships with my new students, but it'll happen, and I know it always does. But if you've listened to me yap this much in my classroom so far, thank you so much. I'm probably looking to do more of these, especially if it does decent. Maybe even if it doesn't, I don't know. You never know, right? But thank you so much for making it this far. And if you are a teacher watching this, I hope you have a great school year. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.